This is Clean at Work with John Barrett and Sarah Bacca.
Okay, so welcome to the next episode of Clean at Work.
Woo! No
Yeah,
woo? Did I do it too early again? Woo?
premature wooing.
Okay.
No.
I'm excited.
I'm so excited. Yes, this week we have a very special guest, Helen Meek, also known as the Kanban Queen, who just happens to be my fiancée. So as you can imagine, she's been, show that ring off. So as you can imagine, Helen has had to listen to me going on about clean for the 6 years we've been together, and so has picked up a few insights of her own along the way. So Helen, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm honoured to finally make it on here after 6 years.
Yeah, well, you did have to ask, didn't you? I was like, oh yeah, you do use clean at work. Why not? So Helen, how do you use clean at work?
So whilst I have picked up a few tips, a thing or two off of you over the years, John, I have to admit the first person that ever got me using clean was Judy Reese. And that was when I was working at ASOS. And I don't know how it came about, but she came in and she ran a session for us. And I remember like listening to the kind of like key questions, you know, what kind of, is there anything else about? And I just remember thinking in my mind, this is never going to work. These questions just do not make sense. And I was absolutely puzzled. But it's over the last 6 years that actually, and further education from yourselves and from Caitlin, that I've actually realized how powerful these things are. So using clean language for me is something now that I do in everyday life. So I work as a coach and as a trainer, and I try not to put judgment because I'm in a privileged position with experience and I can give judgment. And I find that these questions are just awesome at not giving that judgment. And when people say something to me and I'm thinking, well, I'm thinking that, you're thinking that, what kind of, just absolutely comes out of my mouth as one of my first questions. And so it's built itself into my day-to-day coaching and how I talk and how I communicate with people. And further to that, when I work with clients, I quite often do these things called coaching dojos. So I set up programs, which is now our ICF accredited program. And clean was always a module that I put into that. And the reason I love to do that is because I love watching those people think the exact same thing as me, where I was all those years ago thinking these questions sound really odd.
Yeah. What type of reactions do you get from people who try it like after they've done it?
Well, the people using the questions and the models, they think it's odd. It feels really strange for them. It's that uncomfortableness. And it's also a little bit of practice because they're not familiar with like how to use them in quite quick succession. But the aha moment is really when you then say to the person that they're coaching, what was going on for you when those questions were getting asked? And they're like, nothing. I was just in the moment, thinking about the answers, thinking about what's important to me. And so it's that realization that, yeah, I feel like a total weirdo saying these things, but in reality, the person who you're coaching has got a hell of a lot out of these things and didn't think anything strange at all.
How neat. Have people felt like it went, I've gotten feedback sometimes that it feels like it goes really deep, really quickly. And then they start to feel like, oh, this is like therapy. This is really, really like into their stuff. Have you ever experienced that when you've taught it?
Yes, probably the number one thing that you hear from people, though, is that it can feel quite circular. So you find yourself like, well, what kind of? Well, what kind of? And then you like they're not using the full kind of like going into the different depths. They don't necessarily use the target model where you then want to come back up to the original thing that you were talking about. So it's about knowing when to channel it into the depth and when to like, you know, you can only ask so much about something before you have to pick something out of the conversation that you're having. But yes, that's probably the thing that I feel most. But definitely, you do not want to get into that family therapy part where you then start pushing people into things that maybe they don't even want to talk about. So I think that's part of the real skill, to know when to bring it back, and the skill of being able to remember the context, the things that were said, the words that were said. So you can then take that leap back to say, okay, so back to our main topic. You mentioned this. Tell me about this. So I think it's probably more in that space that I find people have those challenges with. So bringing it all together and being able to use things like the power switch question, what would you like to have happen there? That for me is that game changer.
Oh, yeah.
But people quite often get to that point too quickly before they've really explored the articulation of the challenge or thing that that person wants to achieve.
So how else do you use clean at work, Helen?
Like, well, more permutations of what we've just talked about. I also use it in training. So I don't just confine it to personal one-to-ones with people. When I'm trying to understand things where you might have a public training class and lots of people have got different perceptions, then being able to hold the room who's got something else to share and be able to bring out all of those different points, being able to repeat back the things that we're being able to hear and be able to bring that conversation back into one. I do kind of find that very valuable in that sort of like group coaching session. Even though I'm training, you can adapt those practices really quite well to be able to make sure that all of the voices are heard and the different opinions and views are heard within the room as well. So I think a lot of this has a natural fit into training. So coaching, consulting, training, I think it's got applications in all of these places. It's not just in your one-to-one coaching or group coaching sessions that you might have to have. I even find myself doing it with my stepdaughter, just to keep a really open, non-judgmental mind, asking what is going on, what kind of, because as you know, teenagers can be quite turbulent. And so I think there's applications at home as well as work. But I don't work too well when John does it to me in the home lives, because I know his tricks, I know his ninja skills by now. So I'm a little bit like, don't you do that to me? Don't you coach me?
My husband and I have kind of an agreement. If we're just like playing with it, then it's okay. But like if we're in the midst of a disagreement or something, we have to be really careful because it can really piss us off if we feel like we're being penalized. But the what would you like to have happen can be really helpful if like we're spiraling and then we have to realize, oh, like this is what we want and we're not getting there. So I totally feel.
Yeah, we'd sometimes throw that one in between the two of us, I would say. Going back to using it in your family and children, some people say that that's quite tricky, doesn't work for them. Have you got any tips that have worked particularly well?
Any tips? I don't know if I have. I think, it probably depends on the person, but it has to be natural. It has to be natural questions. And if suddenly out of the blue you start asking these questions and they're not used to it, then it is going to be absolutely weird for them. And you've got to know when the point is that actually you've reached the limitations of this thing, and now sometimes you have to be a parent or a mentor to be able to help your child. But I think kids are like sponges. They're the ultimate non-supposition. There's no judgment there. They're just telling you exactly what they're thinking. And so that's why I think it's great in that particular place.
Yeah. I think you have to be careful they don't start using it back on you. I remember when Bella asked me when I was on the drama triangle. That's an example. Poacher became gamekeeper.
Another thing that I really like when I came and did that course with you and Caitlin in person, I think she just introduced this kind of like concept of coding and being able to work with people and understand what their different needs are, and knowing that within the different parts of the group. Because it's very easy to go into a conversation and say, well, my needs are all of this information and, everybody to listen and things like that. But actually, everybody has their own different needs. And again, I've used that within coaching, but within training, you can pick this kind of like vibe up quite quickly from people. And so by being able to flex your style and understanding, okay, so some people need more explanation on things. Some people like their voices to be heard and like to articulate out loud. You can then create a really great environment where, people can get the thing that they need to have, even if it's different to somebody else. And I love those like role plays that we did where we had to create like a simulation, and then we all played a role, and then everybody else had to kind of like decode and say, what does that person need to be able to thrive in this environment? And I thought that was really valuable when I did that on the training class. And that's something that stuck with me, consulting or training, however I'm doing my work.
Yeah, so these codes were like the drama triangle. So is someone in persecutor, victim, rescuer? Or are they in problem mode or outcome mode or action mode? Those sort of things. But of course, there's hundreds of codes you could work through. We just generally use the systemic modeling ones and then based on that decide, what do we do next?
Yeah. Helen, one of the first things that I heard about you was that you're the queen of Kanban. And I'm really curious how you've been able to combine Kanban with clean language.
I think it just becomes part of who you are. I don't think it's like I've made a necessary conscious decision that I'm going to blend these things. I think once you start doing professional coaching, so I went through my barefoot certificate as well. Once you start doing professional coaching and then you learn these different models, clean being one of them, I think it just integrates into your natural language. And so for me, the combination of that was just kind of like the questions that I ask to be able to confirm the understanding of what we're trying to get to. So I think it's just part of me now. And so it's not a deliberate act. It's just there in every single day life. Whether I'm talking to my mother, to my boss, or to my client, it's just there.
I was thinking specifically because we had Andre on a few weeks ago and he was trying to experiment using it with metrics. And I know you've done a lot of work with kind of metrics and telling stories. So I just wondered if you'd managed to use it in kind of that context and how that went.
How did he want to use it in terms of metrics?
He didn't really say yet, but my inference is similar to kind of in these stories and perhaps separating out evidence, inference, and impact could be one way to do it.
Yeah, I guess the thing with metrics is, first of all, I hate the word metrics because it builds connotations. I'm already making a judgment about what the thing is that I'm looking at. And so for me, I tend to use the word insights. And for me, that comes with storytelling. And just because your lead time, how long it takes you to get your work is getting worse, doesn't mean that the team is getting worse. It could just mean you've got something happening, a new project, you've got bigger pieces of work, unknown work. And so the powerfulness of those clean questions is when you're talking to people, you do not want to be saying, well, why is this happening? You do not want to be judgmental in those things because data and statistics are hard enough to understand anyway. And if you're like me, I flunked maths, I got a D. And, it took me a long time to learn how to do these statistics, years. And actually, people might be very fearful of that. So if you can change your language, like, okay, so I see that there's been a change in your lead time and how long it takes. Asking them to then talk about that. Well, we had this challenge within the team. Well, what kind of challenge did you have within a team? I think it's very neutral questioning to be able to help bring out the best of people without making them feel judged as if they're right or if they're wrong. It's about enhancing that storytelling. So I think definitely, you can see applications of that. And I think that's a good one that Andre called out because that's one of the ones that people are probably the most fearful of about the Kanban method. And I think, Kanban is all about starting where you are now, but if you put people into their fear zone, then it can drive behaviors. And by you being neutral, helps them to see that actually that's okay and we can embrace that stuff.
Yeah, it keeps you in that curiosity, right? I guess.
Yeah, it just naturally creates safety, I think, because they see like you're not there to judge them or tell them they're doing something wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Because the big fear in these organizations is that I'm being compared, or if this goes down or this goes up, does it mean I'm better than somebody else? And it's about that neutrality. And like, I've failed several times in companies where I've tried to go too fast, too hard. And I think the hindsight of experience, and that's why I call it insights, that's why I lead with storytelling, that's why I lead with, tell me more about these particular areas. That makes people less fearful, creates psychological safety for them to then open up and tell me the good, the bad, the ugly. And actually, okay, so your lead time is getting longer. What would you like to have happen? What can we do about that?
Have you felt like you've had any personal growth or learning from using Clean or working with Clean?
I think as in like it's made me a better coach. But if your question relates to kind of like, have I been coached using Clean? I probably, other than like what John tries to use these models on me, never get coached by your partner. They always say that,
Right.
vice versa. I probably haven't had someone use it on me too much, I have to admit. But from where I was when I first met Judy to where I am now, the personal growth is that I'm not an expert. I'm not like you two by any means. But the growth is that I feel really comfortable using this within most environments now. I don't know if I would ever use completely clean. I'd probably be a little bit cleanish because I'd bring in some of those other questions as well to be able to help and support. But I think it has really helped me develop in that respect in how I show up with the people that I work with.
Yeah. So going back to the start, we've just got to the end of your 6-year journey. What advice would you give to someone who was just perhaps starting to get a bit curious with Clean, or, as you said, feeling it sounds a bit awkward or scared that it might at least? What advice or tips would you give them?
I think when you feel uncomfortable, it means you're learning. It means you're doing something new that doesn't quite sit right with you. And with anything, it's perseverance and it's practice. And so finding yourself a safe environment where you can take this and you can learn with like-minded people like yourselves or the wider Clean community, having people who can support that journey, then that's going to be great. But ultimately, you have to be using these things every day. You have to be practicing at it. And whilst it feels uncomfortable for you, by asking other people to reflect, so at the end of your coaching session, asking them, how was this for you? Did you notice anything about my questions? Then you'll be able to get the feedback that, yes, it was difficult for you, but in reality, the person found it very, very rewarding in the answers that they were getting back. So I'm glad that after I had that instant dismissal of, well, these questions are just so weird, I'm glad I persevered at it and practiced it and forced myself to do it in coaching dojos with others, because it then changed my perspective of it. So you have to do as much practice as you physically can in whatever environment that you have available to you. But the Clean community is really growing. And so there's lots of practitioners out there. And the good thing about practitioners is they're always open to be coached themselves. So finding someone who you can pair up and buddy with, that's going to be able to create an environment where you can get that really good feedback from. And these courses, they're not super expensive that you can go on. They're very reasonable. And so finding yourself an opportunity where you can go and learn from yourselves or from Caitlin or from other practitioners out there in the world, that kind of helps to consolidate that feeling that you're not on your own, and actually this is a safe place to practice. So you've got to practice to be able to perfect it, and you've got to pass that feeling of strangeness when you learn something that's a little bit different to what you've probably been learned in other coaching models.
So what's next with you on your Clean journey, Helen?
Clean, well, it depends what you teach me beyond, doesn't it? I didn't like the drama triangle because I hated the word drama. So, maybe I can throw myself or find a new word for that. I'm interested in what you were talking about in terms of like Clean interviewing, those Clean questions. I think they would be quite interesting to take a little further look into. I think I'd love the opportunity to run more coaching dojos within organizations.
Mhm.
So for me, it's about, can I bring some of that extra stuff into those sessions? And the bit that I get the most reward from is seeing people grow. And so for me, it's about keep applying this within those different organizations, and whatever new comes out of the clean worlds, then I'm sure John will keep me posted, and I'll learn new things as we evolve.
And then what's next for you with your offerings as well for our listeners who'd like to learn more from you?
Just reach out. I'm on LinkedIn. Always happy to have a conversation with anyone. I'm not about giving a hard sales here. I give away a lot of my time for free for just helping people, because when I learned, people helped me and gave me their time, and I'm all about the same thing too. So if you want to reach out to me, you can find me on LinkedIn. I am the Kanban Queen. You're always welcome to come and listen to me, train you. But, here, just want to help the community evolve, like being the best that we can be and helping the world of work improve.
Great. Well, I think that's all that we have time for today. Thank you so much, Helen, for joining us. It was such a joy. Great to get to know you after hearing John talk about you all these years. And listeners, thank you too for joining us. And hopefully you will be able to join us again for our next episode of Clean at Work. Stay clean.
Stay clean.